Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue au Bracket Show. Bruno Barrette en direct de la deuxième journée de Confoo et j'ai avec moi Patrick Legault, un de mes collègues, pour m'assister à l'entrevue. Et nous recevons Derick Rethans. Hi Derick,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm good, but for once you could have pronounced my surname in the French way and it would have been more accurate.
Oh really? How do you pronounce it? Sorry if I screwed it up.
No. It's quite a bit of a fun thing because it's originally Rethans, but in Dutch we say Rethans, or in English Rethans.
So, all right, well that's good.
It's originally French.
Okay. Speaking of your name, actually, we could start by maybe a brief introduction about yourself. Tell us what you do.
Hi, I'm Derick. I have been involved with the PHP project for a long time. I've been contributing to it, and I'm currently the release manager for PHP 7.4, which pretty much means that I basically need to make the packages every 2 weeks. I mean, there's not a whole lot more around that. You don't have to chase people for making sure that all the bugs get fixed, for example. But what most people probably know me about is that I wrote Xdebug, which is a tool, which is a debugging tool for PHP, and is pretty much the de facto debugging tool. So that's why people usually know me from.
All right.
I'm currently... So I can go on as long as you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm currently in London, where I'm continuing working on Xdebug, and sort of trying to figure out whether I can do this full time or not, but not quite there yet.
Well, at least you seem like you're aiming towards this.
Yes.
All right. Patrick, I'll let you start with maybe the first question.
Yeah, I think you just get out from a conference, right?
Yes, I just gave a talk on Xdebug 3.
How did it go?
You have to ask the people that were there, really. From my side, it's difficult to see, right? I've done lots of talks and conferences in the last 20 years, but including Confoo in Montreal. But the last year, of course, all of these have been remote, and I find that actually kind of difficult because it is so much harder to see the interaction with the audience. You don't see whether they're zoning out or having a nap or actually intent listening. So you don't... Seeing it it's not possible, and that makes it sometimes really hard to actually get an idea of how the people liked it or not. But on my side, I think it went well. I had a slight hiccup because I choose to do live demos, and that is, of course, always a bit of a mistake. But I like living on the edge.
Oh, that's good. I mean, if it wasn't with any hiccups, it wouldn't be a normal live demo.
Well, that's true.
Oh,
that's
and
true.
you see, we got a comment because some people are actually watching the interview right now, and someone's saying it was great. So,
all right, I'm
good
glad
job.
to hear it.
So maybe the first questions I would have from my point of view, because most of our audience in the people following the Bracket Show are .NET developers. So maybe you could start with a bit of explanation on what Xdebug is and how it cooperates or it's used in the PHP world.
So P is written in C. So I'm not actually a PHP developer. I'm a C developer most of the time. Yeah. And Xdebug hence is also written in C and all of its extensions. How people use it is they tend to use it together with an IDE. Popular IDEs are VSCode or PHP Storm. Those are the most common IDEs that people use. And the way how the debugger works is that it makes a connection to your IDE so that you can single step through your application and figure out pretty much what else is going on as well, which is very similar to debuggers in other languages. But it isn't something that is directly built into PHP because having a debugger creates quite a lot of overhead. And you don't really want that overhead if you're running in a production environment. It is purely a tool made for developers, and hence it's a standalone extension. It's an open source extension. It's free for use.
Okay.
But it's a separate extension.
Maybe a side question I have to this, because you mentioned, PHP Storm, VS Code. Is there any difference in developing for either of them, or is there any difference between making it available for both?
So I don't actually work on that side. I only work on the Xdebug debugger side, and it connects via network protocol. So I've never looked at PHP Storm code or VS Code, the VS Code plugin. So the VS Code plugin is something that is also done by the community. And the project itself has recently moved over to the Xdebug organization on GitHub because the original maintainer doesn't really have a lot of time for it anymore. So we're sort of in the process of changing that over and to get some new maintainers on board to sort of continue working on that. But I've never looked at that code, so I don't know anything about that. Although I'm sort of the host of it now.
All right. I'll let you go, Patrick, if you want.
So I finally heard that Xbox 3 was live with your presentation. I'm so thrilled to give it a try. Before I dig into it, can you confirm what PHP version will be available with this new Xbox 3?
Xdebug 3 should work from PHP 7.2 all the way up to PHP 8.0. Most of it also works with PHP 8.1, which isn't out yet. It's still in development. I try to support, whenever Xdebug release comes out, it will support everything that PHP currently supports at that moment. And Xdebug 3 came out somewhere at the end of November, and PHP 7.2 hadn't been fully unsupported yet. So Xdebug 3.0 will continue to support PHP 7.2. Xdebug 3.1, which comes out, well, hopefully in the next couple of months, will be PHP 7.3 and later, because PHP 7.2 is no longer in active development.
Okay. So if I have to debug an older version of PHP, will it cohabit together? Xdebug 2 and 3?
From the protocol is the same, but you can't have the same extension loaded in well, you can only have the extension loaded once, and an Xdebug extension, it needs to be compiled for the PHP it's being used with anyway, so that makes no sense to have it loaded twice anyway, or with different versions.
Okay.
But yeah, all the versions are available, but not supported.
Okay, so it might work. You just don't. No, okay, it won't work at all. Okay.
No, it won't work because the PHP internals change with every version, and because it is something written in C. If Xdebug doesn't understand that C, it can't even compile.
It can't work with it. Okay.
No, it can't work with it. No, the versions absolutely need to match.
Okay, that's good to know. You mentioned earlier PHP Storm, VS Code. Is there other platforms that other IDEs that support Xdebug 3?
So for IDEs, there's no difference between Xdebug 2 and 3. It's purely on the implementation and the configuration of Xdebug where things have changed. So all the clients that would work for debugging with Xdebug 2 will also work with 3. And the list is long. It is like about 40 of them, and I can't really remember all of them. But PHP Eclipse is something that's plugins for Vim, for Emacs. Pretty much any reasonable IDE that has been written specifically for PHP will actually support this.
Okay, so there's a connection between them that makes the transition to a new version seamless. It's not like they have to rewrite all the plugins and all the IDEs.
No, there are a few new features that if you want to make use of them, you'll have to write code for it. But other than that, there's nothing in the protocol that broke.
Okay.
Because that'd be a silly thing to do.
Yeah, that would hurt a lot of people that are actually using other versions. All right.
Yeah.
So, speaking of new features, can you list some of them?
So Xdebug 3 was mostly not revolved around necessarily new features, but the protocol has a few extra things in it to support talking to Xdebug Cloud, for example. And that is something that had to be added to PHP Storm. But the other features are mostly related to making it easier to use. So I have a new function in Xdebug 3 called Xdebug_info, which will work just like PHP info, but will show you specific information just about Xdebug, whether it tried to connect, whether it's connected to an IDE, whether it's created a profile file, whether it's created a trace file, and so on and so on. So the Xdebug 3.0 features are all either performance, bug fixes, or improvements in usability, not so much as adding more things to Xdebug.
Okay. Well, someone moving from an older version, since I read, I think in your presentation's description that it's a near total rewrite. Are there any breaking changes that someone using an older version will experience? Or is it mostly like you said, bug fixes and added features?
No, many of the configuration setting names have changed to make them much easier to use, and I also changed the way how you enable features in Xdebug. So Xdebug is not only like a step debugger where you can step through your code in VS Code or PHP Storm, but it also can create profile files or trace files. And these features in Xdebug 2 are always enabled, which means that if you were wanting to do profiling, Xdebug would also do work for tracing or step debugging. And of course, that creates too much overhead. Xdebug 3 very much separates that out into specific modes. And that is something that you need to be aware of. Of course, I wrote an upgrade guide, which is available on the Xdebug website, xdebug.org/docs, that should basically tell you what you need to change to your settings. There isn't a lot of it, but yeah, it is something that you do need to be aware of and need to have a look at.
But there's an upgrade path, so no worries about this. It's not like someone will upgrade and end up with nothing working.
It is these settings are usually made by developers themselves, so yeah, you do need to change them, but it isn't like that somebody else changing them will break it for you. Beyond that, all the integrations with other tools hasn't changed. It's just the way how you configure things that has changed. How you turn things on and off.
So you were talking about performance. What kind of performance can I expect?
So code coverage is about twice as fast.
Twice as fast? Wow.
Older overhead to profiler, I've showed in my presentation, compared to Xdebug 2.9 is about 4 times as fast. And the overhead in general in the standard, the default develop mode, is also a whole lot less because Xdebug really tries a lot harder not to do anything if it doesn't really have to do. And yeah, it is difficult to say because it depends on so much on specific situations, but I've heard anything from, well, maybe 2 to 5 times faster in situations where it would introduce a lot of overhead. I mean, of course, if you have an application where most of your time is spent in database calls, you won't see that much benefit out of it because it's not related to running PHP code itself. But yeah, it should be significantly faster. So upgrade because it's good for the environment. You waste less energy.
Definitely.
Kind of impressive.
All right. Maybe a last question that I have. Well, you briefly mentioned version 3.1 earlier. So what's the future now that version 3 is out? There's 3.1. What can we expect maybe? And is there even a version 4 that's planned?
No,
no,
not yet. So what I want to do is in 3.1 is I want to, so 3.0 is a bit of a transitional version to get people to upgrade to it. Xdebug has made almost no changes, and it will actually, it has quite a lot of warnings. If you still use your old Xdebug 2 settings, it will actually tell you that these no longer exist. So there's lots of deprecation notices. So what I want to do in Xdebug 3.1 is get rid of most of that because it's no longer necessary and it does give you some overhead. And then there's a few things I want to add to it that make it easier for development teams to do debugging all working on the same server. Because at a moment, because you need to configure your connection point inside PHP INI. If you have multiple people working on the same code base, you can't tell Xdebug to connect to multiple IDs running on different machines. There's no way of doing that. So what I want to add in Xdebug 3.1 is a better way of allowing for that specific functionality. And yeah, I'm not sure what else is on the list. There's a bunch of bug fixes, I'm sure, and some other things that I had to postpone because I wanted to get Xdebug 3.0 out. And yeah, I have no idea of specific new features yet, and I'm certainly not planning Xdebug 4 yet, because I think Xdebug 2 came out 2005 or 2006 or something.
Okay.
And I try not to make a big fuss of big releases, because usually a major version number increase means you're breaking things, and I don't like breaking things. So as long as that isn't necessary, I won't bump up that version number again.
Okay, so that means all the way up from 2.0 since the last version before 3, it's been, well, more than 10 years, and there were no breaking changes.
Right. I mean, there have been changes there have been feature additions, but have not been any changes for people. But because most people use it with step debugging anyway, it doesn't particularly matter. It's just the bug fixes that usually happen. And there's new features added, but there's no real reason to change anything to make it not work anymore. Because people get frustrated when stuff stops working, right?
I find it a great accomplishment to be able to provide new content and fixes all while not breaking stuff for such a long time. We see a lot of, well, maybe features added in packages and things like this that they get so much breaking changes in a short amount of time. So that's quite a feat.
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the nature of things. I mean, although the PHP language itself has changed significantly over that period, and if you had PHP code, that would probably no longer run. But there's no reason why extensions couldn't provide the same APIs. And Xdebug provides so few that there isn't a lot of chance to break a lot of things anyway.
Okay.
So.
All right. Patrick, I don't know if you have any last question.
No, it was very, very clear. Good job, by the way.
All right.
You're welcome.
So, well, Derick, thanks a lot for this. That was really interesting. I hope people listening to it that are like me, not used anymore to working with PHP, will find it interesting and probably give Xdebug 3 a spin.
Glad to be here.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.